I'm doing very well, Shane. Up early this morning and ready to tackle some great content for you guys.
A little behind the scenes fun stuff for you guys out there.
Don't tell them, Shane, that I'm always late.
I wasn't about to. I was like, hey man, what time are you coming in the morning? I was like, I said something like, can you get here early? And you're like, man, I got a party. And this is all through text. So like, I think we missed a little bit. And at any rate, he's like, how about 10? And I was like,
no, that's not what I said. I said, I had told you 10 last time. You just forgot.
Oh, okay.
And I said, I thought 10 and then, but I can do 9 if that's better. And then Shane said something like, cool, let's do that. But he was just going off of the first text where I said we had said 10. And I was going off the fact that I just offered 9. So I got here at 9 and Shane was like, well, hello, Banks. So early.
Banks, he sent me a text on his way here. I think ETA, 9:10. I'm halfway through my first cup of coffee and I was like, damn, man, Banks had a Christmas party last night and he's getting here at 9:10. What a champ. Like this, this is totally different. So. Oh man, but I think we got a great show for you guys today.
I'm really excited.
So we're gonna do kind of more of a listener-driven show today, and because Banks and I have a little OCD in us, it complements the way we like to do things.
What's that piece of green tape there? Like what?
That is one of the other blockers for my camera. It's a little Post-it. You need one by any stretch?
No,
I've got one on here.
I have a little piece of Post-it, but now that I know its purpose, it fits into my OCD life, right. And I accept it.
And now it's back on my computer. Now I have 2 blocking Zuck and the rest of those criminals out there. But at any rate, this episode is going to focus around cannabis, around veterans, around guns, around
Mr. Hornberger,
violence, and Jacob Hornberger, who is kind of a Liberty Caucus. I should say the Mises Caucus.
Isn't the Mises Caucus the Liberty Caucus?
It is the Liberty Caucus for sure. Far and away. Like I keep doing. Hey, I'm recruiting, guys. I can't tell you how many people I've brought over to the Mises Caucus already. I sent in
congratulations,
ton of people, and do
you have your own link yet?
It's in processing, and you actually have to go through the Libertarian Party to get that. So the Libertarian Party has not sent me back my link. Libertarian Party, you need to get on this, man.
No. What they're busy doing is deciding that they're going to support the impeachment because it's so important. To side with this. The facts are just so intrinsically like national security based, and there's nothing more important, right? It's not like there's wars and debt and suffering.
One of our good friends, Doug, here in Georgia, you know him, large beard, and I don't want to give out his last name. Is he kind of a public personality? Kind of.
That Doug. I thought you were talking about another Doug. Yes, he's totally a personality. He wouldn't mind his name being used.
Okay, so Doug Craig, man, here in Georgia, put something up the other day about this. He's like, I'm looking at this Trump, impeachment inquiry and proceedings and all this crap, and he's like, I just don't see the crime, and I'm not infuriated by anything that he's done. And I felt
anything in this respect.
In terms of the Democratic lens for impeachment. Obviously we all talk about war crimes and undeclared war in Yemen and Syria and the rest of all this crap that happens. Like,
and that's just the tip of the iceberg.
If you want to go down that road, great, but that means that they're going to have to throw Barack and the rest of the administration, the last administration, under the bus as well in terms of impeachment. They can't do that. So
I want posthumous impeachments.
Impeachments. I would love it, but
posthumous. No, it's another word. I'm messing that word up.
Post life, basically. Yeah, I got what you're saying, Banks. I'm picking up what you're laying down over there.
But I do want to acknowledge when I get words wrong.
Yeah, but I think that's the general consensus. I think obviously Sarwalk is just jumping on the train because he's an idiot, but not idiot, but he's Sarwalk.
I think that's misguided, or maybe it's very well guided if intentions are different.
Yeah, the fact that I think I agree, but. Let's get into this episode, man, because that's not really part of this episode.
Correct.
It is a current event. That's kind of our perspective. If you're wondering what our perspective is on this impeachment,
I think they knew.
Yeah,
if you listen to the show, by the way, this is the next episode of the show.
Yeah,
I got a great email.
Another listener-driven part of the show. Banks wanted to cover at the very beginning. It's great.
So Joseph, I won't mention the last name. You have the same name, by the way, as a political enemy of mine, but I'm going to try to separate that.
You have a political enemy list, at least here.
Yeah, in my brain.
Yeah,
it's ever evolving. But Joe sent an email saying, "Can you notify me when new podcasts come out, please?" So this is a new podcast.
Well.
Joe, I'm just kidding. One day when we have more time, I know we say that about a lot of things.
Staff.
We'd like to have an email that goes out as well, because that's just a way to communicate.
Sure.
I mean, there's some people who like email. I don't like email. I get way too many now. Do you remember the days when you liked getting an email was exciting?
Yeah,
back in 2001 or something.
It was late 90s, early 90s, before the advent of social media, I think, and email was a step down from a handwritten letter. Let's face it, man. If you got time to write handwritten letters to people that you love, do it. It's a great thing to do.
I don't know. At the time, I was 12, and handwritten letters meant it was my parents saying, "Hey, you have to send your grandmother a letter," and it was like a burden.
Oh man!
So it was different. Emails were a step up. Emails were, what were the first emails I got? Between friends.
Yeah.
Just being like, "Hey, help me with my homework" or something.
I literally have probably 99.9% of the letters written from the time I went into the Marine Corps to the time I got out. And a lot of times, because that was in this weird world of the internet is really catching on, right? The amount of letters that I have fill up literally ammo cans and ammo cans and ammo cans. I mean, I loved writing and talking and having these handwritten letters, and you really kind of find yourself, especially with the people that you love, because let's face it, you're not putting a handwritten letter together to talk to people that you don't really like, right? It's probably a shorter letter that's, "Hey, thanks for the goodies and thanks for the well wishes and things like that." You send a thank you note, but it's not that that you're in in a life and death situation, and you're really kind of, I don't want to say making amends, but every time you write to somebody, it could be the last letter you're writing. And
I think it's a great part about technology. We hear all these people who have these claims, like Andrew Yang and so forth, the robots are coming, everything's going to change, you're going to lose the factory jobs and all this.
Yeah.
And I think among all the other things they don't see, like basic economics, one thing they don't see is that things changing are for the good sometimes, even though you might not see it at the time.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that letters are not something we do anymore, and we get all our communication from apps. I mean, apps is even kind of a new thing, past 5 years. We don't spend time necessarily on our email, checking all the emails from eBay and Amazon and so forth.
It's like your mailbox. What you get in your mailbox.
You've got individualized things you can personalize. If you like running, your phone tells you about when you're supposed to go run. If you want your Amazon thing, it doesn't go through an email. I do get an email from Amazon, but the Amazon app pops up and says your package was delivered and you weren't there to sign for it or whatever.
Yeah,
crap. But it's made letters much more valuable because nobody does it.
Yeah,
and so why would you want to stop innovation and remain with the printing press when you can have more and more? It's like a win-win. It's not only do you get your Kindles and you can download stuff off the internet, you also get this other thing that becomes much more valuable than it was in the beginning.
Yeah, the fact that I have handwritten letters from my grandparents who are now deceased, during that time where you just pour your heart out to each other, it's cool. It is a neat thing that I can bear. I have welling in my eye right now from even just saying that. I've gone back and I've read those things, and I'm just golly, they were just such fantastic people. And at any rate, we're getting way off subject, but it's a great
that's what we do.
Great segue into the military and our first topic. Jacob Hornberger appeared on Part of the Problem, and we've been talking with his people that he's definitely coming on the show. We're trying to get something hammered out, but
we were supposed to have him on before Part of the Problem. We just I think it was my scheduling that didn't allow for it.
Yeah.
But I do think he's quite interesting, but I knew he was the director of the Future of Freedom Foundation, and he's been in the movement for a while.
Long time.
But I didn't know much about him.
Right.
And more people know more about him. You've got the Tom Woods and the Dave Smiths, and they've been making this argument that he is a Ron Paul-esque, not just in ideas but figure.
He is.
In that he's kind of like straight-laced. Yeah. He's older. Kind of mellow, maybe is the right word.
He's he is definitely one of those guys that we were kind of talking before the show just a tiny little bit, and like, you want to throw this part in because we're already having a pretty good discussion about it. He reminds me a lot of Ron Paul, and I'm not saying like there's ever going to be another Ron Paul. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that there may not be somebody who becomes greater than Ron Paul either.
Yeah, that's not possible. I don't believe that, guys.
But what I am saying is he approaches subjects in a very, level-headed way. He's not bombastic. He is, one of those people that I think, is just, extremely sincere. He believes that this country is capable of so much more than it currently is, and he believes it's stifled because of control, and control is just another word for tyranny. To have him sit there on Dave's show and go through the litany of discussions that they did, I think one of them that I really just found very refreshing, finally, from candidates out there, is the fact that he is completely against our foreign policy. And I mean, blatantly. I mean, he's calling out Trump. He's calling out everybody in the past, the Bushes, the Clintons, the Obamas that have just taken our military and run amok around the world with a devastating foreign policy.
Yeah. So skeptical me, as much as I've seen him, he's been part of the movement and so forth, wondered, and I was worried about one specific case that could happen, is that if you've got all these people who are trusting him, and I think now they're right to trust him, but before hearing more about him, I was worried about this, and put him in this limelight as he's the next Ron Paul. Like, this is the figure. If you supported Ron Paul, you support him. And the people who came before Rand Paul, funny, even though,
oh boy,
and Gary Johnson just didn't have the same allure, and to get so much praise and confirmation that somebody who's not exactly a Ron Paul could be trusted to be a Ron Paul.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I was looking for is for him to say all the right things, which anybody who focuses on libertarianism, whether you're libertarian or not, could do, right? If you've got a semblance of intelligence. Yeah. It's not that hard. Our ideas are pretty simple. So you could just repeat them. And if enough people praise you and there's not enough like constructive criticism or questioning, then you could just like be put in a pedestal and you could be a fake. And so what I was looking for is something different. And he definitely, as much as it is very Ron Paul-esque, there are things that Ron Paul never said in a certain way, things that are like that wouldn't be very calculated, and that lead into our second subject very well about veterans specifically.
Yeah.
Was Hornberger in the military? I don't think he was.
No.
And that is very uncomfortable, I would imagine, in politics for somebody who's not in the military to say. I could see some people who already maybe have a bias against libertarians just jumping down his throat and being like, how dare you say these kind of things?
Yeah, I know.
He uses the words murder and serial killer, not talking about the military itself, but in the context of, and those are things that just make us like recoil just a little bit, because it's like, whoa, this is a sensitive subject here, kind of thing. And I've got a few clips later on.
Yeah, I kind of, when he was given that interview, I got that impression that he didn't tiptoe through it. And
yeah, he doesn't. He's
very confident.
He seems almost careless. If I didn't know better, I think it'd be careless, but it's just matter of fact.
It is. And from a veteran, from a guy who's been on some really, really terrible front lines, I'm telling you right now, I think he's exactly right. I think there are a number of us
so
out.
You're saying you guys aren't like the sensitive type?
You know what's funny is I think there are, man. We're a mixed bag, right? We're
course.
A mixed bag of nuts, if you will. And there are people who, I hate to say it, are still rah, rah, rah. God bless America, home of the free and land of the brave, whatever it is. And it's just, it's a lie. It's a lie that they've been told their entire life. They went out, they quote unquote served their country, and they're still wrapped in that flag. And if you say anything terrible about their country and their service, basically what you're saying is that they're a liar, they're a killer, they're one of the worst types of people on earth. And that's not what people are saying, because I don't think you can be those people. I don't think you can be a person that was brought up in a government indoctrination system in ignorance to love your country, to praise your country, to think that the USA does no wrong around the world, and then go sign up and get ultra indoctrinated by the U.S. military. And then trust me, they got it down. I mean, you think you understand patriotism? Go sit in classes for 200 plus hours, just learning about American military history around the world. You think you want to know why Marines think that they can go and do things? Like, you look at all the other services and things like that. The Army has soldiers, the Air Force has airmen, the Navy has sailors, the Marines have Marines. Like, it is a verb, it is a noun, it is everything. And you're not like, what they teach you is you're not alone when you go into battle. You are holding up a reputation of some of the most fierce shock troops that have ever been around. And by the way, you're as star spangly as they come, right? Mm-hmm. That indoctrination, that ability to inspire somebody to run into a firefight, that is a crazy amount of quote unquote patriotism, right? And to try to walk that back, to try to get people to understand, hey man, you've been lied to your entire damn life about.
Well, it's not just that. It's that, like you said, the first thing they think is like, oh, you're calling me a killer and a bad person, a horrible person, so forth. It's like we've left no place for any nuance. And the nuance is, no, you're a good person who, or potentially not everybody's a good person, but the vast majority, I think, are a good person who is indoctrinated, and then you are fed some lies, and it's not as simple as that.
It's not, and
you shouldn't have. Nobody should have such a vitriolic reaction to somebody without any ill intent, saying, "Hey, let's think about this." Well, like that. That's all we're saying. Like, let's just think about this.
And that's what I would say.
And the vitriolic reaction itself should be an indicator of a problem.
Yeah, and the thing is. They may have discovered that. They may have seen some crazy stuff, especially the guys who are combat vets, right? Mm-hmm. They may have seen some crazy stuff down line, basically, and further repressed it and said, no, this is what I have to do. This is what I have to do. And somehow mentally made it okay in their mind to do that because, star spangly awesomeness again.
Well, there's a bunch of reasons probably. One thing I think it's important, you mentioned this in one of the War Stories episodes we did, and it helped me. I've thought about it ever since because it helps me understand the context is that the combat veterans specifically are such a small, tiny portion. You said 1% of the military, right?
No. When you look at when you look at combatants, right? Even the people who are quote unquote the O3s in the Marine Corps or the operations side of the military, even most of those people don't see combat.
Yeah. So the operations is already a small portion, and then within that, there's an even smaller portion. Who are actually see combat.
Exactly.
And it seems like when we talk about when we are allowed, air quotes, to talk about the problems and let's think about how things like that, it's not all good, it's not all bad kind of thing, that it's viewed through the lens of military combat, and most of the people talking about it are actually have nothing to do with that.
They can't even, that's the thing, and most of the people in the military can't, they know some guys that have been downrange, and that's it. Like, and it hopefully and luckily now it's getting smaller and smaller and smaller again.
Yeah, I want less people being in violent circumstances.
My point is in all of this is in terms of smartly addressing people that are combat vets, period. Along that spectrum, you've got guys like me who are way off in outlier land, right? Where, hey, when
at least you're aware, Shane.
When I saw the stuff and I said this doesn't add up anymore. Everything that I've been told, and I had kind of this mental violent reaction that made me want to go find truth. And then you have the other end of the spectrum, which I think, unfortunately is more or less the populated end of the spectrum. for the most part because of the status quo, because there are support groups that reinforce this that are, mainstream, the VFWs, the American Legion, things like that, where you have all these guys that still think that our foreign policy and what our guys are doing overseas is a good thing. And then you have some guys that have kind of wandered away from that, scene just because mental health doesn't support being in these groups anymore and reliving and telling stories and all that kind of stuff. And I'd say those guys are probably more of the combat vets versus just the people who are, that other portion of the military that are not combat vets. And then you have those guys on the other end of the spectrum who I think are farther, who have wandered, farther and farther away as in their pursuit of truth. And so to address, this, the way Hornberger does and the way he understands, I think is, somebody who is extremely insightful, empathetic, and nuanced in his own understanding of it, which I find refreshing as somebody who has done that 180-degree turnaround. And I just want to put that out there for people, who don't understand, who are, part of the Libertarian Party, baby killers, blah, 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 blah. And guys, listen, I'm not saying that atrocities don't happen. What I'm saying is in a vacuum where people have only been indoctrinated with American propaganda, and I say government propaganda, it is not something that you can expect them to automatically turn off and go the other way. There is a divorcing of ton. I mean, we're talking years. We're talking literally years from the time you're 5 years old up till the time you get out. And for some guys, that's when you're 22. You get in when you're 17, 18 years old, and you get out when you're 22 years old. And now you got to divorce yourself from everything that you've learned since you were 5 years old, basically. And that is a big, hairy, awful red pill that I think most people get hung up on. You see veteran suicide rates through the roof because they don't know how to process it. It drives them insane, which is another episode that we're going to try to get to at some point. And I just think that when I listened to Hornberger, that was one of the things that I picked up and I really appreciated about him.
Yeah, I'll play the clips in a second. I think that I think you're very right about everything you're saying there. But I would add that it's not just the indoctrination part. I think a lot of what we're dealing with, and it's a good thing because it's a truth, but it's also, I think it's easy to be optimistic about because this is all part that it also has to do with just human nature, like the nature of living a life and whether it's in the military or in your daily life, if you're excited about something and that something pans out to not be true, what the core of its thing, like sure. I'm going to go fight for virtuous ideas and ideals and do good for people, which is one of the most rewarding things people can do, sure. Right? And it turns out to not be real. If you do that in any other aspect of life, there are these same kind of problems, right? Depression and not feeling good about it, and then what this does specifically to young men who have a whole, like, it's a very productive time of life, right? I mean, even like teens and early 20s.
It should be your most productive time.
And so that has a whole but this could happen in any facet of life. And so it's not as much as the indoctrination problem is definitely a problem. It would not necessarily just go away if we got rid of that. And so part of this is just normal human nature, which is stuff we have to deal with when we finally get away from government anyways.
Yeah, it's very complicated. And to reinforce the point that you just made, there are situations where when these guys are in other countries where atrocities are happening and they are part of them, there is also amazing good that they do while they're there. And that is a crazy dichotomy for the brain to possess that doesn't understand the real situation at hand. So if you're going out and you are securing a house for some residents of that country, you're rescuing hostages, or driving out, I mean, brutal people in those neighborhoods that have, sex, dungeons and torture chambers. And I mean, seriously, I've been in them. I mean, I've seen the catacombs and places where we're dug out, especially under Najaf, where you would have nightmares about what has happened in those places. And when you do, some extreme good where you get rid of some really bad people, there's a weird dichotomy, isn't there? This is like, people don't understand. These guys are going, no, man, look, we helped this neighborhood, or we helped these people. Specifically, I can remember their faces. And now you also have the same guys going out and, absolutely destroying a city or something like that.
If it's that complicated, how could you not go insane one way or the other if you weren't allowed to have a nuanced conversation? But if the conversation you hear all the time is either you're a baby killer and a horrible person,
sure,
or you're the best person ever, and you don't get the truth, because the truth is neither of those things.
Yeah.
Because none of us are the best people ever, and none of us have, and we've all done some bad stuff. If you don't get to hear the truth, you're going to go crazy.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's inevitable because the truth is important.
Yeah. But, so, I mean, if you got veterans friends who are, really having a tough time out there, maybe have them listen to this in the beginning. I mean, from, this is one of those places where it's okay to go out and experiment and try to learn some new things. Like, that's what I hope comes of a lot of these conversations, especially for guys who are veterans. Set an example, go replicate it. If a knuckle dragger like me can do something like this, there is a world out there for you to do. There is whatever people want to know it. And that's the thing. I'll tell you, this nuanced conversation that we're going to have today, I think is going to be a lot of fun. So
so clips of Hornberger, because I keep on talking about
them. We'll keep going.
I've got 2 of them, and you guys will. The commentary has already been done, kind of, but they're really good.
Yeah.
An invading power of the United States. So all those people over there that have been killed, we don't know what the exact number is, but I mean, we got to stay focused on that too. It's not just the troops that have died. My hunch is that a lot of reason the troops are coming back really messed up mentally, committing suicide and so forth, is that I think they realize on a conscious and subconscious level that they've killed a lot of people that really they shouldn't have been killing.
I think you're absolutely.
So that is the thing that, you just don't hear that normally. And as much as like Ron Paul got everything on foreign policy right, this was not one of his talking points. This was not one of his natural talking points. And this seems, I've heard him in other places say this now that I went and listened to as much as I could about him. Mm-hmm. I've seen him say this multiple times. Not a thing that non-military people get to say in like on, if it was on Fox News, on MSNBC. I think it's, I know, I'm naturally just thought that, if people are committing suicide, they're having internally in their brain that there's a conflict.
Yeah.
That seems logical to me.
No, and think about that conflict. I mean, you are talking about some of the most traumatic situations these people have ever lived through, probably the most traumatic situations. And to not have somebody be able to speak to the nuance of the situation like Jacob Hornberger can, man, you are setting these guys up for for suicide. You really are. You're setting people up for insanity and suicide where they can't make heads or tails of this. Listen, if you feel like you're this person, like you can't make heads or tails of this, and you're in a weird spot that you just don't understand the world anymore and it doesn't make sense, it's because you were damn lied to. You were indoctrinated and you were lied to. Now, here's the question. What are you going to do? Are you going to give up? Because that's not something you were ever taught. You were never, ever taught to give up. You were taught to adapt and overcome. So the question is now that you have this little truth nugget, that you were lied to, how do you find the truth? How do you fix it? How do you get out and apply and start learning and doing things that are completely 180 degrees to what you were taught your entire life? Can you do it?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I think that's I don't have personal experience, but I think that's the great thing about the truth is that once it's there, you can't really hide it. Yeah. It's not possible to hide. It's the analogy of the truth is a light, like a candle. Mm-hmm. Like candle, like obscure. Not obscure. As candle kind of lights up darkness, but there can't be enough darkness to extinguish the candle, right? Yeah. Even if there's tons of darkness, it'll still be there.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, for a guy that's kind of gone through all of this takes years. I mean, it should it could take years. What I will tell you is the brain is an amazing thing, absolutely amazing thing. It's going to protect you not only from the world, but it's going to protect you from yourself, right? And there are things where you will rationalize through, some people will call it being sociopathic, that you can rationalize and compartmentalize things that you've done in your past and for reasons. If you've done things in your past because you were led to a point to do things because of lies, is that intrinsically somebody's internal fault?
So that would be part of trying to stay on the truth, because I would think that you would have to figure out how much of it is your fault.
Yeah.
And if there is a fault, which I think we're all responsible for our actions, but there are mitigating circumstances. Mm-hmm. If you indoctrinate a child, I think that is a mitigating circumstance, for example. And I think that the important part would be to acknowledge the truth. And it's probably not as analytical, like it's like, oh, I'm 40% responsible. But if there was a number, the best thing, in my opinion, would be to acknowledge that specific number.
It's a feeling.
So if it's like, yeah, I'm 40% responsible for that, and I acknowledge it. And if you try to hide that from yourself, that would be as much damage as anybody lying to you could do.
It'll eat you alive. That's the thing, is you got to get to that place in your mind where you go, listen, I did some things that I did not have all the information on. And now that I'm starting to get information, I'm going to capitalize and I'm going to find the answers that I am looking for now, because all the questions that I have back here were not answered correctly. Now I need to go back and find all this. It is an exhaustive mental exercise and adaptation that you have to do to go out and be productive again.
And I don't think you even need a perfect answer. And the reason I'm thinking of this is life is complicated, as much as our ideas, and some would call us like autistic, libertarian type people. Our ideas are pretty simple. It's like the non-aggression principle and taxation is theft, and that's it. Those are true. But the practicality of life is that it's complicated. We talk about, well, how do you navigate within this world where you don't like the ideas at the same time, and you're paying taxes, but really you shouldn't be paying taxes, but you're doing it under duress, so that's okay, and we're justifying and trying to figure it out there. I think it is also okay to acknowledge that and say, hey, I'm not exactly sure. I know that I did this, that, or the other, and I know that we live in a broken, complicated world. So maybe I just need to be less harsh with myself, and that's okay. And acknowledging all that should, at some point, bring somebody peace. Yeah, I would hope.
Well, I'll tell you,
I think we all have to do it to some degree.
Yeah. I mean, I think everybody has to do it. I think this is an extreme case where when you talk about what you've done because of misinformation, disinformation, indoctrination,
or just because of the practicality of life. Like, I never want to kill another person, right? But if I had to defend myself or someone else, and it came to a point, especially in the moment, you don't have time to sit down and be like, hold on, let me figure out the right principle to this amount of violence. If I try to talk the person down from shooting me, could I potentially be successful in not having to shoot him back? No, it seems like there's a time crunch here, so I'm just going to shoot back. Like, even that, I kind of lost some train of thought there.
I'll tell you right now, for me to sit here and have this conversation in terms of the amount of what's the word, angst, that is associated with this topic. I'll tell you, one of the best things for me in terms of rectifying my past, right? We talked about the different stages and what the requirements are for penance. Yeah. Right? For me, this is one of those things.
Agreed.
I spend my life now in the pursuit of liberty and peace and free markets. That is because I had the opportunity to see behind the curtain and understand the truth of the matter. It is now my responsibility and my obligation here, not for anybody else. I don't owe the world a damn thing.
Except for non-aggression.
I owe it to myself, I believe, and I owe it, to everybody else out there to do this recompense. Go out there and make sure that anybody who could possibly be led down the same road you were led down is at least privy to information or has access to information from somebody who's already done it. That is one of those things. It doesn't have to manifest itself in running for office or doing a podcast. If you're working with, other groups, And I'll even put this out there. If you want to start blowing minds and talking about, the military industrial complex and what it does in terms of foreign policy and all this kind of stuff, what we don't talk about is everybody who has paid into this system through force that has helped further those things along.
That was just what I was talking about. How the fact that we're under duress, so we make these decisions where I think we should be somewhat soft with ourselves.
So for everybody who's a cynic and a critic of people who don't quite understand this as people who are combat vets and everything, hey man, unless you didn't pay your taxes, unless you gave the middle finger to the thugs out there, you enabled it. We're all enabling this situation right now. What are we doing on the other side of that to push back is my question. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that you can even add on top of that, and this might actually be, I would say it's something that helps, but I actually think that it might be a very important part of life in of itself, and that should be the goal. But is look at the bright side. And I know that sounds easy, but the gratefulness of going through situations and having those situations bring you to the truth. Maybe we're both biased because we love this thing called truth, and we think it's so cool.
So biased.
I am
biased.
And some people don't intrinsically just find the truth by itself that amazing. But I think it would be at least a tool. I think it should just be a purpose of its own, but at least a tool that helps to be grateful for the opportunity to have this information. That if you're humble enough, you can acknowledge you would not have if you had not gone through the situation. I might not be as empathetic about XYZ if I hadn't suffered XYZ.
Yeah.
Or not XYZ, ABC. You can't, it's not the same thing. But,
sure. No, I understand what you're saying, man.
So, but yeah, I have one more clip of Hornberger that is even a little bit more controversial.
A country that had never attacked the United States. And so you send these troops. I mean, if you take Dave, for example, a serial killer, he's got his conscience so buried that he can go out and kill a bunch of people. Doesn't bother him a bit because his conscience is so deep down hidden away that it doesn't bother him. But you take your average soldier, sergeant, private, lieutenant, captain, he's got a family. These are guys that usually are women that go to church. Their conscience is right there on the upper level. And so you send them into a country and say, kill or be killed against people that have never attacked the United States. And so all of a sudden, they're people who are defending their country from a foreign invader. They're called the bad guys for defending their country against this illegal invader, unconstitutional invader. And the soldiers put in the position, well, I don't have a choice. I'm going to have to start killing all these people who are firing at me. How can that not affect a person of deep Christian or Jewish faith that has a conscience that knows it's wrong to kill? I don't see how anybody can be put in that position and not have it adversely affect them when they get home.
Yeah. Again, and I don't mean to cut off Dave. I love you, Dave. And I like that we can play this without any worry because they don't believe in IP either. So.
Yeah, it's great.
But really, I think that specific line is what makes me like him more than anything else, because it's like, just like Ron Paul already said it, dude. But this, actually, Ron Paul didn't express this in this way or mention this. He mentioned something else I think is important, and that is these wars couldn't go on if collectively all the individuals that form the military didn't take like the final action of pulling on a trigger or pressing a button, which I think is an even more difficult thing to tell people, because that's, the personal responsibility component there is uncomfortable. But this shows not only a lot of empathy, but a very nice way to bridge the gap between people and say, hey, this is an impossible situation people are put through. And I think it's a great way to talk about the military, about police officers, about people in general who are, air quotes, upholding the law, that they might have put themselves in the situation to a large degree. And there are some people who are capable of foresight and seeing that there's going to be a problem here, and they may have taken compromise and taken some shortcuts and so forth, but they still have been put into a impossible situation. And if they don't even know it, it's even sadder.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you're led to an impossible situation through ignorance, right? Or disinformation or misinformation or indoctrination, that's a terrible, terrible thing. Now, I'm going to say something fairly controversial that, I don't know, I hope we don't lose listeners, but I really don't give a damn. If you can't swallow this This one might hurt a few people out there. Christians, people of the Jewish faith, I think people from Taoism, Buddhism, most of the major world religions out there.
So all the major religions that to some degree or another have some, maybe not all the tenets, but have some basic tenets of the golden rule-ish type thing.
Even Islam, okay? Most of these major religions teach and preach peace, right? They
to a large degree,
non-aggression. The fact that American Christians and Jews and everybody else has gotten so comfortable with the idea that what we're doing over there is okay to some degree, that it is justified somehow, that is something that I have a real problem with. And I see that, I see this hypocritical nature and this hatred and this bigotedness that comes out of people. Like, troops got to be there, they've got to be fighting them there, we can't fight them here, and things like that kind of thinking, that you can hold that in your head.
So the disparity between what the religion is supposed to be teaching and the justification
and what we're doing. I mean, I see it there. I see it with upholding an executive. I don't care which executive it is, because they've all been there. They've all ran on peace and adopted the war mantra afterwards, or been coerced into it by the war machine. At any rate,
that's you being very nice on that last one, Shane.
Yeah. And for these people out here, if you're one of those people that think that this is an okay thing for us to do, and you hold yourself up as a devout anything, I got news for you. The way a lot of us see you is through this lens of you don't understand what the hell is going on, and a lot of them are the same. Like I said, they're holding up the executive in the same way. I have real consternation and problems with that, man. It's beyond me.
I see your point. Hypocrisy should bother us in any situation, even and especially in ourselves, because we're the only ones who can fix that.
Yeah.
But I'll challenge you on 2 points there.
Okay.
The first point you already know, and I know you knew this while you were saying this, is that
thanks for the credit.
Yeah, I'm not trying to be demeaning.
No.
Is that the generalization is dangerous.
I agree.
And I know you know that, and I hope people who are listening know that too. Especially when we're dealing with big numbers, and religion, fortunately or unfortunately, deal with huge numbers, right? Some of the biggest numbers there are.
Yeah.
Like more than just we're American. Like what is there? Like 2 billion Christians and 1 billion Muslims?
Something like that.
We're still winning, guys.
Jeez.
I'm glad you like that.
Boy.
And the second one is eternal optimist that I am. Mm-hmm. I think we're much less comfortable with it. I think that there is a lot of hope in the world. I think most of it has to do with the fact that we can communicate more, the fact that we do have to talk like a collectivist, like a societal education process where we get to impart knowledge on future generations because we have the technology to do so, and the brain power and so forth. I think we used to be, I'm talking super collectivists here, we used to be much more comfortable with it. The Crusades were the best thing ever. And it used to happen much more. I mean, there's so many examples. The Crusades is a good one because that shows you that I'm actually not a hypocrite. I know Christians do tons of horrible things.
Think about right after 9/11 too. I mean, you had a nation united, basically saying, "Let's go kick some ass and kill some people."
There's that. I was talking more about. I mean, this used to be the normal way of life. That it was just that your religion was right and you should dominate the world to impose it. Whatever religion is, I don't know. Maybe Buddhism and some of those were a little bit better at that. I
guarantee you somebody bastardized it at some point, right?
Of course.
Yeah.
I think they've been doing it like that's what happens when there's a conflict. There's some people who are proponents of a free Tibet who have become like radical terrorists as well, which gives credence to China, which should have no credence at all. To say, oh look, there's these violent monks out there. But no, I think we used to be much more comfortable with it, and I think we are less comfortable with it. Of course, you've got conflicts that arise, and I think the bigger one is governments have a big mouthpiece. Unfortunately, I wish I could duct tape that crap.
Oh man, yeah.
And I think they are still pushing an older idea than what the newer idea is. And we see it when we talk about the fact that, well, Trump said he was anti-war.
So did Obama, so did Bush, so did Clinton. I mean, all of these guys they all ran on, non-intervention and having troops here at home, and every single damn one of them has obviously done the polar opposite.
Yeah. So it's a process, but I think we're miles away from where we were in the, I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. So
the year zero.
Do you have any other clips of Hornberger you want to play, or do you want to save them for the show? Because I guarantee
I have one more, but I think we can go on. We're probably pretty far in.
We're 45 minutes in right now.
I think we go to the Grant stuff. I had one more, but it's not that interesting. So it was just Hornberger talking in 2011. I was like,
yeah.
And he's also consistent. But that's Ron Paul is consistent. He's consistent. I'm liking this guy, even though. I think John McAfee is still pretty cool. For those that didn't know, John McAfee's running for the LP nomination as well.
Yeah.
And I think even if he loses,
McAfee's a neat guy.
I think he serves a wonderful purpose for the world because he's different. And peace, a big part of it is being able to acknowledge, to be okay with and comfortable with and love very different things. Even if you think it's weird and so forth.
He's peaceful. Who cares, right? Like I don't care what he loves and what kind of life he lives. It's weird to us, but that's what he loves. So whatever.
So you got a message, or we got a message on Facebook from our friend Sarah.
Yeah, this is back November 21st. So Sarah, I told you we would do these, and these fit nicely into the show. So your question, Sarah Ellis, is now that marijuana legalization, cannabis, I'm going to call it cannabis.
Look at that. Look what happened.
Now that cannabis legalization has passed the House committee and is on its way to a vote in the House, even though it might die in the Senate, what's your opinion on the theory that marijuana, cannabis legalization is a backdoor to 2A infringement? We're gonna take this apart because there's a lot of questions at the end of this. What is all right? So the theory that marijuana is a legalization, cannabis is a backdoor 2A infringement.
So a conspiracy.
Man, I've thought this for a long, long time. Banks, if you wanna. If you want to weigh in first, I mean, I kind of dominated the first part talking about veteran crap, and so I want to give you the floor here.
Well, you dominated, but my opinion was more important. So people saw the way, the quantity, quality.
I say quantity was way up on my side of the microphone. So
I don't have a problem with that, but yeah, I'll give you my opinion. I think the state's going to state, and.
State is going to state.
I don't just say that to make you laugh, but the reason I say that is because I think that whatever happens, in the same way that lawyers get taught to argue both sides of an argument, it's like, you can win whatever side you're on if you just
if you got a better argument,
you're cunning enough, and sneaky and so forth, and you just know more than them. I think that whatever happens, whether cannabis gets legalized, whether there's more freedom here in school thing, I think the state is always going to find a way, just like a sneaky lawyer, to like war game them out of like, oh, how can we use this new the reality of the world to do more state stuff. So I think that it is definitely a backdoor, but I think that everything that government does and that is attached to government, which is unfortunately damn most of our lives, is a backdoor to tyranny. They do it all the time with everything. They do it with the word patriot and freedom and liberty, which is not supposed to be used for those purposes. They do it when when I think probably most of the good things that happen are used as also backdoors to tyranny. When we get happy about, I don't know, Ron Paul wins a congressional seat, Liberty sees fruits in, like, Yao has all these people elected. We get distracted by that and they pass things over there. Like they're always stating all the time. And I think this is more of what is happening in this instance. It's very easy to tie together because you're already, there's such a big industry of we have to ask permission for the cannabis and for guns that it's just easier to tie together. But I just think it's what would happen anyways. I don't think there was a conspiracy of, hey, we're gonna get cannabis legalized so that we can backdoor do guns, because
they don't want it legalized in the first place.
They don't want it legalized in the first place,
Yeah.
and tyrants are usually pretty simple-minded. So just go straight to the point. It's more complication for them, but I think they can see the bright side. Like they're pretty smart too.
Yeah,
and the bright side is, look at what happened. How these little peons, they're probably enjoying the crap out of this.
Oh, I'm sure they are. I think it's a lot what you say. Kind of to coin a term, legislative judo, right? Where you take the momentum of your opponent, right? Because let's face it, liberty and states are always in conflict, and so when the liberty starts to push the state back a little bit, what do? They grab it. And then they turn it and they twist it and then they put it on its head.
It's what happens, even though people might be very misguided in who they support as a politician.
Yeah.
But it's what happens literally every single 4 years. You've got like Trump who runs, and then he says some good things that I think everybody should acknowledge and not have a problem of saying, like, I think Trump has done some good things. Unfortunately, there's much more bad than good, but whatever. And then the momentum is, okay, we're going to his good things. We're going to get less wars. And then what does everybody do? They just fall in awe on their knees praising Trump, and that plays straight back into the government's hands.
Yeah.
We do it all the time about everything. I love the legislative judo.
It's exactly
analogy.
what happens. The state just takes the liberty that has some momentum and then flips it and says, okay, we're going to give you this, but we're gonna go back over here. And
they usually don't say the second part.
And by the way, guys, what we're gonna do is we're gonna get rid of this right or this right or this right under a medical condition or a some fallacy of thought and logic that really, once again, puts the state in control. And it's an either or. You either have to choose. You want to use some cannabis or you want to exercise your rights.
So a question for you who knows about like judo and jiu-jitsu. What do you tell two fighters of like equal level who know that they're going to be using these, like, use the momentum of your opponent? What do you tell, like, if you're on one side, like, what do you tell him? Hey, that this person knows how to use your momentum against you. How do you protect against that?
Well,
does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to get into some extreme nuance, and I'm trying to relate against all of this. It can't be when liberty is winning and momentum is going. There cannot be concession, right? You cannot make any compromise in an evenly matched fight. And the perfect example, right? Last weekend, my children, who are all in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, my oldest, Jackson, he is, like I've said, he is a phenomenal athlete and grappler, and he was born to do this kind of stuff. So we get there, he doesn't have anybody in his weight class, and 10 pounds in any weight division is a ton of weight to give up, right? If you're going to go up, you don't go down divisions, you go up divisions. And
going down would kind of defeat the purpose, because then you'd just be stronger than everybody else.
Yeah, and Jackson, if other kids don't have somebody to roll with, he's always been that kid who was always younger, because he started when he was 3. He started in jiu-jitsu when he was 3, so he didn't have people who were his size. So he was, instantly rolling with kids that were 5 and 6 years old as a 3-year-old. So he's had this mismatch his entire I don't know, over 5 years now in jiu-jitsu.
Probably a good thing.
It is. It's an extremely good thing. Got to be careful with it with kids who don't know what they're doing and their power, who just want to win.
So the older, bigger kids.
Yeah. So, and we had this discussion. I mean, he placed second in both his gi and no gi divisions in an upper weight class over 10 pounds. And some of these kids he weighed in at about 74 in their 10-pound divisions. So one of these kids was almost damn 90 pounds, man, and pushing. So the fact that he goes in there and he does some amazing things, but he gets sloppy on some of the basics. There's posturing, there's escaping guard, there is, keeping your hands in the box. I mean, some very basic things where he got caught in somebody's guard and he couldn't get out of it because he just wasn't performing the basics. Mm-hmm. And I had to have that conversation with him. And I said, hey, man, listen, on any given day in jiu-jitsu, if you are equally matched, whether it's belt, skill, weight, age, all this kind of things, if you're absolutely evenly matched, and you go in there and you perform flawlessly and you take care of the fundamentals, you still have the ability and the opportunity, I guess, to lose that match to somebody who's just better than you. So if you go in there and you give it everything you got, you're technically sound, and you can leave everything on the mat. The only thing that you have to worry about is your performance today being better than your performance yesterday. Because he had some consternation with getting second. He's just not used to it. And so I said, now, when you go up a weight division and now something is not equal with that other person, the technicality and the effort can be better than that other person. But if you're outweighed by 10 plus pounds and you mess up one of those two aspects, the fundamentals, you are absolutely almost guaranteed a loss. You can win if you get everything right and you put out maximum effort. But what you can't do is go in there and be fundamentally flawed or not put out maximum effort.
What a very cool analogy. And I asked thinking that there might be a very cool analogy, but I didn't know it was going to be so cool. Because it focuses on what I like to focus, which is you're going to be outmatched by the government very often. You can theoretically perform perfectly and still lose because they're big and
they outweigh us.
And the only way to win in that case is so your performance, the more detailed performance stuff doesn't matter as much, but because you're so outweighed, the thing that has more value is the fundamentals.
That's right. So technicality is
taxation is theft. So you just go around with your acting like a chicken with your head cut off, screaming taxation is theft.
Yeah, here's what you can't do. You cannot compromise technicalities. That's the takeaway in my analogy is you cannot compromise on anything that these guys will try to do. They'll try to do everything you can. You never ever compromise. You may lose, and you will lose. Most of the time you will lose. But if today you gave a better performance than yesterday, if today you went out and tried harder and you were more technically sound than you were yesterday and you didn't compromise on principle, in this case, on technique, then what you're doing is setting the stage for something greater tomorrow.
I think this could be the clip that could get us on Joe Rogan. And because it's freaking awesome. You could even, so now the optimism side is not, the fundamentals are the more important part. Yeah. If you're going against an opponent who just outpowers you, the fundamentals become even more important.
Yeah.
The great part is our opponent, their fundamentals are fundamentally flawed.
They are.
Which gives us an upper hand if we focus on the damn fundamentals in the first place.
That's right. I mean, and just look at what's happening here in the state of Georgia, right? We have a state representative, Matt Gertler, down here, who has become a verb, right? You can't go for full Gert. If you go full Gert, then you're going to be ostracized. You're going to run people against you and things like that. But look at what he is achieving. He is achieving a following. And a following of public opinion and changing societal norms and culture is what we are faced with. It is a behemoth of a mismatch. But at the same time, the thing that we have on our side is truth and principle. I don't care.
I mean, that you could even, that's what's happened when people run against them.
Yeah.
Literally, they have more money, they have more people, like almost everybody, all the establishment people endorse the opponent. And yet, where do they fall flat? On the fundamentals, on the truth. They lie. And Matt's just like, well, actually.
Look at that. Yeah, and he does.
And then he wins.
And that's the thing is, Matt doesn't compromise. That is the key. You do not compromise. So,
I did not expect this to be so cool.
I love this discussion. She follows on, and I'm going to keep going through this because we're at an hour. This might get a little long. She says, quote, I mean, like, obviously, I know, but would love to hear you guys talk about it on the show. Do you see it as legit? And how does an individual choose? Are there any pro-gun, pro-cannabis causes or groups that you guys know of? Do I see it as legit? No, I don't see it as legit. I don't see force ever. You know, if you're ever using force to implement your ideas, they're not legit. Your ideas suck. And how do you choose? Here's how you don't. that's the paradigm is not that. The paradigm is you either get your Second Amendment right, or you either get your inalienable right to protect your life, liberty, and property, or you get to use a naturally grown plant at your own disposal as long as that's not the choice. The choice is defy these bastards.
Well,
okay?
no, so I disagree there. I think the choice for each individual is to himself. I could see people being in a situation where maybe they're responsible for a lot of people. They have a family, kids, a wife. Maybe they also, I don't know, employ hundreds of people. Like they're somebody who's important to that degree, right? Having to make a decision to, maybe they like cannabis. Maybe it even helps them a lot, and they make the decision that they're just too much in the public light, and there would be too much downfall. I don't think that's optimal, but I think that could be a potentially reasonable decision that somebody would make. I would be scared to give a one-size-fits-all, not that you intended that, but a one-size-fits-all to everybody. There was a time when I was like, screw this system. I'm not going to get a gun license. My gun license, which lapsed, by the way.
Oh, man, that's another $70-$80 here in Georgia.
I know. Because I just forgot about it because I live like a free person usually. But I used to just open carry and not have a license. And I realized that wasn't the right decision for me because, well, I'd go to jail and
I can't fight for liberty in jail.
That's my decision. There are people who go to jail for liberty. I have a ton of respect for them.
Yeah.
But it just wasn't my decision. So I think it really is and we had a question like this from our friend Justin a while back, who was talking about whether to get a license or not get a license. I think it's very complicated, and this makes it even more complicated. There are questions on most states, and especially at the federal level, when you're buying a gun. There is a question. It says, let me find it here.
Yeah, it's basically, have you ever used...
Are you an unlawful user of or addicted to marijuana or any depressant, stimulant, narcotic, drug, or any other controlled substances? Not only are we talking about cannabis at this point, but this is like broad swath. I wouldn't tell on the podcast for you to lie, because that's probably something that people would get upset about.
Here's the other thing is, marijuana is a made-up word. So are you addicted to a made-up word? Have you ever used a made-up word? No, man, that's not what that is. That's not how I identify that plant. That plant is cannabis, period. And if you sit there and check no, this government that is a legal fiction to begin with, that has made up other fictions out there in terms of terms and words, man, use it. This is the point. Use it against them. Oh, you guys want to play games with words and scheduling and nature and natural law? Cool. I'm going to do the same thing. I don't identify that plant as a marijuana plant. It's a fictional thing. So in those terms, have fun. Never ever lying on these forums in good conscience. That's my takeaway.
I definitely see your point. Very well taken. I would imagine this is the weird thing is tons of people do cannabis and other depressant, stimulant, narcotic drugs or controlled substances.
Stimulants like coffee? Oh my gosh.
These have to be under the premise of controlled. But there are a lot of people, I would say there's like at least half the population fit under this thing. And of those people, I would say a vast majority of those, or a large portion of those, probably own guns that they have bought from FFLs where they've had to answer this question.
So I'm going to play devil's advocate here just because I think it's fun. The FDA and a whole lot of
so coffee is a controlled substance?
Yeah.
I could totally hear that argument.
Well, I mean, and that's the thing is when we talk about tariffs and everything else, what comes into this country, a lot of coffee that comes into this country is not grown in this country. So I imagine it goes through border control, it goes through the FDA, it goes through a number of different things out there that are government apparatuses.
Okay, so I take it back. Every single American falls under this and should not be allowed to have a gun per the HES decision.
And, if it ever got to that point, when you start seeing places like Virginia where people are standing up militias to say, the hell with you guys. I don't care who you bring against us, because they're trying to criminalize an entire sect of the population.
It's a weird thing though, because this doesn't affect most people. So I've got in front of me a letter. It's an open letter to all federal firearms licensees. The reason that the other side is getting a little bit of traction is because there was kind of a headline a few years ago of this cannabis legalization, and unfortunately a lot of some people on the Christian conservative side kind of use this to be like, cannabis legalization is actually going to hurt your gun, so we have to like not be for cannabis legalization.
Yeah.
And so the headline was, what they're doing is they're legalizing cannabis, and then after the fact, they're banning people who are going to be using cannabis from owning guns. And that is not what is happening at the state level. What happened is states are completely inept at defending liberty whatsoever, and as they've done with most situations, they have deferred to the government. And so they sent letters to the ATF and to the federal government saying, hey, what are we supposed to do? There's this conflict here. We've decided that our people need more freedom. This is not actually how they phrase it, unfortunately, probably. We've decided that we will allow them to have a little bit more control over their bodies, as long as they ask permission and pay a fine and fee and so forth. And what are we supposed to do? And so the ATF was like, oh, well, thanks for deferring to us, one government to another government. Here is our open letter to people. And I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'll include a link because I find it interesting. It's a pretty short letter, but they basically say, hey, we've had all these inquiries from AGs and federal firearms licensees, and they're just scared of all this freedom here because they're not used to it, and they want to know what to do. And they basically say that the states have passed these laws, but that it's still unlawful, and they state multiple federal laws that say that not only is it a controlled substance that has no medical purpose and that is highly addictive, but also that there is federal law 18 U.S.C. 922G3 that prohibits any person who is an unlawful user or addicted to any controlled substance, as defined in the Section 102 of the Controlled Substance Act, from shipping, transporting, receiving, or possessing firearms or ammunition. Not only that, you have U.S. So in the same 18 U.S.C. 922D3 makes it unlawful for any person to sell or otherwise dispose of any firearm or ammunition to any person knowing or having reasonable cause to believe, which was bolded, that such a person is an unlawful user or is addicted to a controlled substance, as provided by more.
Yeah, so it doesn't matter. It doesn't it matters, but it doesn't matter in a court of federal law right now, because if
the supreme law of the land, per their opinion.
Oh yeah, because all these agencies and alphabet soups that I can't find anywhere in Article 1, Section 8 to even exist have made us a bunch of colonists again and serfs to appease and fund the crown that is DC.
But not only this, then because they're being pretty specific about this, and they're realizing that people are deferring to them, which was the first, as I said, the first error, is they're saying, therefore, here is how you should proceed. If in your state cannabis is legal, and somebody has a card, because in most states, unfortunately, you have to have a card, or you can't just go somewhere and buy it, and somebody has a card, you should tell them that they have to answer yes on the question.
Yeah.
If not, that would be illegal. And participating in that illegal subversion of the law would be a felony in of itself. Not only that, but if they use it for proof of residency, their card, or you just believe that there's probably a big chance that they use cannabis because for whatever reason they say, then you should just tell them, no, you can't buy this gun, and go away.
Yeah, to listen to authorities talk about this makes me vehemently just want to puke, man. As a rule for myself, I don't take government's advice. Right? There is an internal moral compass that you have to be okay with at some point. And if the feds are sitting there telling you that a plant that grows like a tomato is somehow, illegal and shouldn't be on this earth, well, I have a higher power that goes, I think the feds are wrong, right? if things exist, they exist, and you can't tell me why they exist. You can't tell them not to exist for human control. And so, like I said, man,
what I find funny is, yeah, exactly, they exist, and then the same way, but I think it's the same thing for a gun. It's like a gun is actually natural, right? It's made from everything is made from natural things.
They exist.
That's my argument. So they just exist. So stop having this war on things that exist, people.
Yeah. That's exactly right.
So just for this is the part I knew you would hate. I do not want to push the conspiracy. I don't actually think states are passing cannabis laws and then passing gun laws. They've just made the stupid decision to defer. But it was controversy. And so you've got like PolitiFact and the Facebook. What's the thing Facebook uses? Snoops that gave their opinion on this. And this one article is just it's the prime example of they live in a different world where they think that their sources mean something. And so this article from PolitiFact says it's false, which I agree with, but their premise is, oh my God, this is what happened. Actually, the truth is this: we have gone and we've asked the states if this is what they're doing, and most of the article is a list of quotes from Alex Traversio, a spokesman for the Bureau of Cannabis Control in California, told us he's never even heard of such a claim. Brian Smith, a spokesperson for Washington State Liquor and Cannabis Board, said there's no link between purchasing recreational cannabis and medical marijuana and owning a gun. Madeline Kane with the Oregon Liquor Control Commission said the agency doesn't regulate firearms at all. She doesn't know what they're talking about. It's just a whole list of them asking the government if they're doing something nefarious. And the government's like, no, I've never heard what you're talking about. I don't believe it is possible for somebody in that position to have never heard about the connection, because they directly deal with this by deferring to the federal government. It's hilarious.
Yeah, and I'll tell you right now from personal experience, I think in 2006 when I was going through VA disability boards and all that kind of crap, I had buddies who were doing the same thing, kind of getting out at the same time, who were in, my platoon or my team. And they were like, hey man, you can go in here right now and claim that you've got PTSD. I was like, what? First and foremost, why would I go and tell the government that I have PTSD, right? Like, it seems just
so
like...
they can help you, Shane.
It seems
Don't you want help?
An open door out there for the government to come in and then start looking into my life, right? Like, if I tell people that I am mentally, somehow I have a disorder, which PTSD wasn't a thing, I think, until... I don't know, the early part of the 2000s.
Well, it was the thing. It just wasn't called the same thing. It was called shell shock.
Yes, and that's what I wanted to talk about for just half a second, because it changed, right? When I saw this new nomenclature come out, basically for the same thing that post-traumatic stress or shell shock or flashbacks or any of that kind of talk about psychiatric issues that veterans have. I sat there and I told my buddy, I said, hey man, you sign up for PTSD. I know it's a lot of money every month, and I know it'll help you out greatly, but consider this nefarious government that we have that really sucks, that just sent us over to these really terrible places to do really terrible things, will do terrible things to you. And
there's no examples of that though, Shane.
Right. Yeah. There's not only a litany of history that demonstrates and I said...
They've literally used veterans lists, as we've talked about before. I think we found out this about in your campaign.
Yeah.
To say that older veterans should have their right to control their finances taken away because, Yeah.
I said it, this is back in 2006. I said, hey man, it's up to you. I would advise you not to. I will not be doing the same. And so I never did. And, he was in Minnesota, and, not 5, 6, 7 years later, whatever it was, Minnesota starts, floating the idea of taking guns away from veterans with PTSD. And I was just like, hey man, I hate to be that guy that said, told you so, but look at this article. You might want to think about relocating. Now he lives in Texas, but I digress. I've got a reason.com article here that kind of,
I think I put up the same one,
highlights this. It's vets who use medical marijuana shouldn't have to give up their Second Amendment rights. This is by Ben McDonald. It was written this year, 6/20. Read a little bit of it. Despite many states legalizing medical marijuana, I'm just going to use his language, guys. Medical marijuana, the fact that it remains illegal under federal law has forced some U.S. military veterans into a difficult choice. Using the drug to treat post-traumatic stress disorder could cost them their constitutional right to bear arms. I have a whole lot of problems with the language in that, but he's not wrong, right? Like he's illustrating the point. The problem results from a question that gun buyers must answer when they're going through the federal background check. Are you a unlawful user of or addicted to marijuana or any antidepressant, stimulant, narcotic drug, or any other controlled substance? Underneath the question on the federal firearms transaction record form, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives warns in bold type, the use or possession of marijuana remains unlawful under federal law, regardless of whether it has been decriminalized for medical or recreational purposes in the state where you reside. Then he gets into a case, but basically this veteran says something to the effect of, I fought for the rights, for your right to bear arms. It's literally in the Constitution for me to be able to own a gun. I think it's ridiculous I would have to trade one of my rights for another right. And so, yeah, I mean, this whole thing, it's out there, right? There are states that have literally gone the liberty route that now want to strip liberty, as we said, through legislative judo, to take rights away, especially from people who they deem somewhat nefarious and complicated and a threat to the state. Because what do we know about the Department of Homeland Security? Have they labeled returning combat vets as potential radical terrorists and things like that?
I think they've not just them. There's a whole swath of Americans that they've named as potential terrorists.
Yeah, and so to see this happening and unfolding, the article goes on. It says in 2017, the chief of police in Honolulu, Hawaii, sent a letter to all residents who own guns and were registered for medical marijuana cards, telling them to turn in their guns. Your medical marijuana use disqualifies you from ownership of firearms and ammunition, it said. The letter cited a statute that reads, no person who is a fugitive from justice or is a person prohibited from possessing firearms or ammunition under federal law shall own, possess, or control any firearm or ammunition therefore. However, after much of the public outcry, Honolulu police backed down somewhat, while the program put on halt, forcing people to turn in their existing guns. City police still refuse to grant new firearms permits to people who are registered medical marijuana card holders.
Wow. Similar
issues have cropped up in other states with legal medical marijuana, including Florida, Missouri, and Maryland. Meanwhile, in Pennsylvania has tried to circumvent the federal law by refusing to share with federal agencies the register of people who hold medical marijuana cards.
Why would they be sharing with federal agencies that list that shouldn't exist in the first place?
Yeah.
Like that's
crazy. That's what I'm getting to is
literally it means that your state, if they're sharing the list, has shared a list to the federal government saying all these people per your definition are felons. Mm-hmm. That's what the government literally just took hundreds of thousands of people and said, hey, we've got all these felons in our state.
Yeah.
So it's a weird situation where obviously the law isn't being enforced. Mostly it's just like most speeders don't get caught. You've got people. I've got friends on Facebook who live in Colorado who post themselves like shooting and smoking at the same time. All federal felons. This is how people write books that say that 3 felonies a day,
right,
under the premise of your average normal person commits 3 felonies. This is how it happens.
Yeah.
That is just crazy.
We need to get to the best part of this whole thing. This is still the reason article here. A few federal lawmakers have begun to take note of the problem. An interview with Marijuana Moment last December, Thomas Massey, Republican out of Kentucky, complained that the ATF considers any user of marijuana to be an unlawful user of marijuana. Massey also tweeted his support for removing the marijuana question from the ATF altogether. Massey is not alone in Congress in wanting to fix this law. In April of this year, Rep. Alex Mooney, Republican out of West Virginia, introduced legislation that would allow medical marijuana patients to be exempted from the question when purchasing a firearm.
And this is the legislative jiu-jitsu.
Yeah,
the problem is, as much as it could be a good thing, then we get trapped, and we get trapped in the idea that this needs to be there at all. It just needs to be taken out. And so what I know is Thomas Massey would never introduce such a stupid bill.
No.
He'd just say, how about we just take it off Schedule 1, tell the government that it's the same thing as a tomato, and to just leave us alone.
This is the last thing I'll read from the article, and I think it's interesting. Bill H.R. 2071 states, quote, an individual shall not be treated as an unlawful user of or addicted to any controlled substance based on the individual using marijuana for a medical purpose in accordance with state law. You know how they spell marijuana?
I don't.
M-A-R-I-H-U-A-N-A. Do you know exactly what that is? That is the term that was first identified by California, I think back in like the 1870s, when we had that influx of the Mexican Revolution.
Oh, they spelled it with an H. That's
with
right.
an H, right? So now we're getting way back to the roots of this entire damn thing in full circle to say, yeah, man, this is a made-up ethnic term to scare white people and his racist roots, man. Like, kudos to both Massey and this other guy who was
no, half kudos to the other guy.
Yeah, half kudos, Alex Mooney. But I think it's a step in the right direction. You know, creating awareness of the situation and saying, hey, listen, this needs to be stricken from the record altogether, right?
I agree. This is actually a good example. I do think that having allies is a good thing, right? So, and allies don't have to be 100% on things. You can. Who's another one I like a politician?
Justin Amash.
Yeah, no, Justin Amash is mostly Liberty. He's just gone a little temporarily weird. I'm still holding him on the Liberty side. But you've got people like...
Rand?
Yeah, I'd say Rand. I say Mike Lee, Ted Cruz sometimes.
Sure,
okay, you can be their friend on many, many issues.
I agree.
And you can potentially not push back against some of their ideas that you don't think are like the right way to phrase it and so forth, right? Mm-hmm. But this is how, if you're looking to trust people, if you're looking to have champions that you won't, because there's a lot of time investment to supporting a candidate, for example.
Sure.
I would highly advise to only invest the most valuable of your resources, time and money and so forth, in people who are the Thomas Masseys of the world, who write the good bills, which is get it off schedule and so forth, rather than the fixed bills. The fixed bill, it doesn't mean that you should like go down and say this fixed bill is just a statist conspiracy. He's on his knees in front of Ralston at night, like you don't know. It just means you can leave it there, but these aren't the people you expend a lot of time in. And making that contrast will move people towards liberty when they see that, oh, why do I get different support? Like, why does Ron Paul get this support and Rand Paul gets this support? The fixed bills are not actually the best strategy for liberty.
Yeah, I think it's probably also important to know now that the House Judiciary Committee did vote a couple Wednesdays ago, I think, to approve legislation that would effectively end the federal prohibition on cannabis.
That's a good.
And so you know, it was a 24-10 vote. It seems like, you know, the political will of the people is starting to finally infiltrate Congress, and you know what we talk about in terms of getting to that point where all of a sudden it's kind of an overnight thing where, you know, for decades and years and years and years you have this kind of like this slow going, and then all of a sudden you get to a critical mass point, and then bam, it's legal. So I don't know, it's definitely something.
It kind of happened at the state level, like 10 states plus DC who have recreational. Like, that's not something I would have thought would have happened 10 years ago.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. I mean, Michigan just came online as recreational as well. So, I mean, what is that? It's one of the first Midwestern states to go. I think it may be the first Midwestern state to have a recreational.
Midwestern, yeah, I guess so. Because you have Massachusetts too. That's east side.
Northeast.
Yeah, so I think in the middle ground there. I think the first one. What's the first southern one?
We don't have one yet.
I thought we had one.
Florida has
it's not right.
as medical.
I'm talking about recreation. I mean, medical. I think there's like 38 states now.
I think it's going to probably be a race between Mississippi and Arkansas that's out there right now. They have in the South. They have more in terms of legislation for medical already being purposed and everything else in those states where they have active card holders and things like that. So I see it there. Maybe South Carolina. I
don't think South Carolina.
Deep in the Bible Belt, so chances are that if
the Bible Belt moniker I don't think applies that much anymore. Honestly,
on cannabis.
In general,
Yeah.
more if you compare here, so the South to L.A. and New York, yes, but. Besides that, I don't
even the
think so.
Midwest, man. Like being from the Midwest, and even in my travels around the country, out to places like Idaho, and kind of the skirts, and like it's.
How can you say Idaho? Idaho, northern Colorado, Utah. That's super duper religious. I would say that is more of a Bible.
Idaho. It's a different feeling for me, like in terms of religion.
I've never been to Idaho.
In my reaction,
but you realize that I think it's like 40% of people in Idaho are Mormons. Yeah. Mormons are much more serious religious people than your average Southerner.
I agree for their sex. They're also
well they
live and let live kind of people.
They are, but we're just talking Bible Belt, which is people who read the Bible ostensibly.
Yeah, it's not so much more. It's not fire and brimstone to them. I guess maybe that's the delineation for me. Is down here is fire and brimstone. You do this kind of stuff, you're going to hell, and it's gonna have white women, quote unquote, and this is Reefer Madness. This is not Shane Hazel. It's gonna have quote unquote white women sleeping with the Negroes and the jazz musicians and things like that. That's what I get out of the Bible Belt, especially out of the older generations down here.
Maybe it's just because Atlanta has changed so much since I was a kid. That, like Atlanta is a cosmopolitan, for sure, super liberal place now.
Yep.
So
yeah, it really is.
So I think that was a cool conversation. You had one more thing that was also sent to you by our friend Sarah.
Yeah, it's
you have time to talk about it.
It's a new grant to research connection between military service and violent extremism. Banks, how many movies have you seen where military combat vets are just painted as these crazy, loose cannon, trigger happy, can't wait to go home and kick the dog and beat their wife and kids and all that kind of stuff?
I've seen some.
Yeah, they're out there. I mean, definitely out there. They get painted as these people who just obviously can't adapt. And listen, there are plenty of cases where the people have done some terrible things.
Yeah, people in general, not just military.
On average, the people who are veterans, the people who are out of military service versus the civilian population, I don't know if the numbers are all that damn different. They may actually be better for the military versus the people in the civilian pop.
I would have guessed that it's about the same, a wash. But if one beat the other, I would have gone potentially the other way.
Yeah.
But in general, I would think it's a wash. And in general, I don't think that it's definitely somewhat telling. It's not like skin color or like hair color or whatever. That doesn't matter whatsoever. And categorizing people by that and saying they have a propensity to this, that, or the other is stupid. But I don't think it would have that much of an effect because we're talking about a large swath of people. When you average it down,
there are a lot of the percentage of movies that are out there though that paint veterans as the weird, crazed maniacs and stuff. I think is disproportional to.
You think it's disproportional? Because there's weird, crazy maniacs of all like
movies made
in movies, but there's other crazy maniacs they have like the crazy professors, Who else is painted as crazy people in movies?
Oh, man. Crazy people. Well, I mean, I guess obviously you just got your straight up killers like Silence of the Lambs and Buffalo Bill or Bob or whatever the heck his name was.
So you've got some who are like higher intellectual crazies. You've got some of those.
You've got disaffected, like your Mission Impossible types, so disaffected like agents and stuff that are out there.
Yeah, some of those. You've got the professor ones and you've got the military ones.
Yeah. And it seems like it kind of revolves around the military-industrial complex of some sort, whether it's
there's a lot of that.
Paramilitary, military type. Anyway,
you got rogue cops.
Yeah,
and you got some corporate evil overlords, but that's a little bit on the other different. Yeah,
absolutely. So this article also from Sarah is from this is D War. We'll link it. Don't worry.
It's a division of the University of South Carolina.
Yeah. So this is new grant to research connection between military service and violent extremism. This was published October 3rd of this year. I'll begin reading it now. The U.S. has seen multiple mass violent events perpetrated by military veterans. Thousand Oaks, California, Dallas, Texas, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Charlottesville, Virginia. Understanding the factors that lead to these terrifying events and why members of the military may be susceptible to extremist beliefs may help prevent future violence by veterans and others. You want to comment on that first paragraph at all?
I can. I don't think that it's necessarily focused, like this is where we're going to find the solution to violence in general. Yeah. But I do think that probably lots of aspects of life, especially if one of the aspects of your life is training in violence or knowing about violence, could lead to that. So, I mean, I don't think it's intrinsically. The intrinsic problem with this whole thing is that it's a grant of your money going to somebody else.
That's where I was going.
Oh, I'm sorry.
All right. So that's the goal for Carl Castro, director of the Center for Innovation and Research on Veteran and Military Families, CIR, at the USC Suzanne Dvorak Peck, whatever School of Social Work, and Research Associate Professor Hazel Atul, who have been awarded a 3-year, $1.6 million grant by the National Institute of Justice.
So the National Institute of Justice sounds so just plain. It sounds all good, right? God. It's the Department of State is who's giving money.
Their research...
Sorry, the Department of Justice.
The Department of Justice. Their research will focus on how extremist views grow within military members and veterans, ultimately informing development of an assessment tool to identify former military service members who are at risk for engaging in homegrown violent extremism. This is the first such study focused specifically on military veterans funded by the NIJ. Boy... That is, you're going to take $1.6 million of stolen money and throw it at a question, basically, is that I think a loaded question to begin with.
I mean, if it was done privately, I don't think that I think it could be done within an objective setting. I don't think it's a bad question to ask. Again, the public money part at the public school, who are also getting paid by public money, that all bothers the crap out of me. But the question itself doesn't bother me, and I think there's a very easy answer to all this is yes. When you lie to people, there will be consequences. When you repeatedly lie to people, there will be repeated consequences, and those consequences can sometimes be of different levels. Sometimes it means that 40 plus veterans kill themselves a day. And sometimes it could be something even worse, because how people cope with trauma and being repeatedly lied and forced to believe something that's not true over a long period of time, I would call that trauma. People have unhealthy ways of coping with trauma all the time. That's why we have the drug problem we were previously talking about.
I think the whole thing stems from a very, very concocted paradigm to begin with. I don't think there's a problem. That's the thing is, with veteran suicide, I think there's. But are they hurting anybody else besides, monetarily? I guess their family. No, they're not. They're ending their own lives, which they have obviously the right to do. I mean, let's face it. Naturally, they have the right to end their own lives.
They do. I don't think it's
everybody does.
Ever a good idea. But
in terms of the problem being that there is violent homegrown extremism in former, military service members or veterans. I don't think there is. I don't see a national epidemic out there of, no kidding, combat vets going out and doing real damage.
I think they are emphasizing the quantity, and I would have a problem with that. But but aside from the quantity, I think there is anecdotal evidence, which means it exists. And I think just logically, the potential is there in the same way that we talk about this when we talk about how it's really dangerous when we attack a country with tariffs or other destabilizing measures, because what happens is it gives the state that we're calling the enemy already, so let's say the government of Iran, the illusion that they're the good guy, and then you've got the people who are actually most affected by all these policies, right? The tariffs actually hurt the people; they don't hurt the elite in Iran. The taking down their dead democratically elected leader hurts the people. It doesn't hurt the elite, really.
Right.
It gives the people a flawed reason, yes, but a reason to hate to misallocate the hate. They'll start hating America instead of hating, and us instead of hating them. And that is how you get terrorists who do horrible things for understandable reasons, right?
Yeah.
You have American drones that they know an American bomb civilians, kill hundreds of thousands over a decade. You're going to get, we obviously see it. I don't think it's that logical, but it makes sense. You're going to get terrorists who come and blow up towers and do things here. It's very understandable why they're doing this because of human condition, right? People are angry, and anger and frustration when your loved ones have been killed doesn't always come out in the most productive of ways. And I don't see how the military here would necessarily be exempt from potentially having the same reasons. We've seen that there's been some, I think one of these shootings, at least the one in Texas, is here. Yeah, I guess that's the one in Dallas, Texas. He was a Muslim who was angry about what the Americans were doing, right?
Yeah.
So it could be anybody. You could have somebody who, for whatever emotional reason, sees that he's doing wrong. He connects that to the military doing wrong. That means he empathizes with the other side. And because of the paradigm that we've created, we, the government, all Americans, through some means, incorrectly, I'm not saying that he's right, incorrectly decides that he's going to take it out against a system who has emotionally scarred him and made him see this false paradigm of, oh, they're the bad guys, and the worst of paradigms, I should kill innocent people. So I didn't expect us to disagree on this, actually, which is funny. I'm feeling very free to talk about this, even because you're my friend.
Yeah.
But would military people start screaming at me if they heard me say this? I'm not saying that there's a propensity. I'm saying there is a possibility. And it has happened, so I'm not wrong.
No, you're not wrong per se. And I'm not.
Are you more offended by the fact that the government who is creating the problem is funding this itself? I think is disgusting.
I'm not offended by much, and I'm offended by
bothered.
I am offended by my government stealing money and then studying something that I don't consider even a problem. Right? Like, this is a made up BS problem.
Okay.
If there were, in my eyes, if we really, really had a problem with guys that were combat vets going out and turning this country on its head, we would know about it. Like, there is no concerted problem that I am aware of or concerned about in terms of combat vets going out, strapping up, getting body, all types of body armor, and going out and just killing people or even shooting up their own government, for God's sakes. Like, how many combat vets are there out there that have the wherewithal to not only go in it alone, but organize and take down their local, state, or federal government? It's just not happening.
I mean, there's lots. So that's my dad's argument when he wants to be positive. He says, like, hey, do you know how easy it is to terrorize?
Yeah.
You rent a U-Haul, you fill up gas tanks. Like, he always uses that. He's like, and then you just drive really, really fast at things.
Yeah. For a guy that they taught how to professionally terrorize, right? Like, we're not doing it. It's not even close.
Now, I totally get your point. I guess I have less of a problem with the idea of exploring any possibility, and since it is a possibility proven, then that doesn't bother me. The funding, the fact that people funding are stealing and they're funding something to study a problem that they would have created anyways, I think is definitely bothersome.
Yeah. It talks about helping veterans transition and spotting risk factors that I can read it if you want me to, but it's I don't know. Helping veterans transition is you gotta. It's what we talked about earlier in the show. I want to leave it at that. I don't want to get back into that. It's that there is nuance. There are people who are on different ends of the spectrum or along their path, and you got to find out where they are on that path before you get really major, into deep conversation. First and foremost, being critical of these people who are trying to get to that other end is probably one of the worst things you could do to invite others to that end. Okay,
Agreed.
And so. Think of it that way. I know you got, for those of you guys that are just woke alpha foxtrot, right? Like you guys out there are an exception. And I understand the anger and the madness that comes along with those early stages of being in that transition from one end of the spectrum to the other end of the spectrum. The problem is you got to get through that anger and and get into an understanding area where you are helping the situation, not hurting the situation by dropping bombs, on metaphorical bombs in terms of thought and ideas and principle on these people. You've got to nurture these guys along and almost let them think it's their idea, because
baby birds,
baby. Don't feed them too much at one time, or else they're just going to barf it all up. And
I'm going to throw that one back at you, man.
Okay, go ahead.
No, I'm like in general.
And understanding radicalization is another part of this article. It's worth a read. I think it's totally. I just think the paradigm is wrong. So that's my take on it. If you got,
I mean, I gave my point already. I don't think it's unfair. I think the side point about the fact where the fundings come from and the hypocrisy is interesting.
Yeah.
And we have a different starting point of reading this. But when I read through it, the thing that was most came to my mind, which I haven't talked about yet, is I just couldn't help but be like, if they're actually researchers, right? If they're actually in pursuit of truth, which I would imagine that's what researchers do, the only thing that I think they would find is, oh, look at this. It's almost as if they would I would think their conclusion is, it seems like this is how terrorists are how people get radicalized. It seems like something that the military is actually doing over there.
Yeah.
So maybe there's a little bit of infiltration over here, and then it would be like a big revelation.
Yeah.
That's the thing that I kept on. I mean, like, oh, they're like 5-year-olds. Like, I feel like I'm so much more intelligent than them because I've already figured it out. This research is dumb.
Yeah. So being the cynic I am, you hit on something. If these were researchers who were in pursuit of the truth and things,
mm-hmm.
I think,
or capable, they could be just stupid.
Yeah. But I think the premise is wrong, because when you look at how a lot of researchers are funded through government force and all that kind of stuff, what these guys are looking for are dollars to support their livelihood so that they can stay in the profession of research.
I think there's price signal mix match, but I don't think that necessarily allows us to judge their intent completely. I think they probably want to find cool things and so forth.
Could be nuance there as well. And
the name of the episode will be Nuance.
We're at an hour 45, man. So
that went fast.
Yeah, it was a fun conversation though, and I hope we have shed a lot of light on some things maybe that some people aren't real close to.
We rarely disagree on foreign policy stuff. This is kind of related, so that was interesting.
Yeah, it was fun. Anything on your side that you want to get in before we wrap everything up?
No, I think we just do the the things that are important, like you need to go give us more reviews. We haven't checked in a while, but we're really happy to be over 100. Now the next goal is 100,000 reviews.
That's right.
So you can do that on any podcast app. The Apple Podcast app and iTunes specifically are where we have most of our traffic. It's 75% of our traffic, and we would highly appreciate. We'll read it on the show. And so you could theoretically write anything you want, and we'll say it.
We're always looking for more sugar mamas and sugar daddies out there. If you want to help fund our
Cringe.
Oh, come on. If you guys want to help fund the show and help us get out there and reach more and more people, you can go to patreon.com/rebellionpod. And if you got something to bring to our attention and you want to do more listener-driven shows, which I really appreciate, because, I mean, I'll tell you, between production and scheduling and all that kind of stuff, if there is just content on demand that our audience wants, we're going to give it to you. So info@rebellionpod.com. You can send us emails there. You can send them to our Facebook accounts, Twitter, whatever, in terms of reaching us. We've got some pretty cool guests coming up on the show here in the near future. And so, whoever you want, whatever you want to talk about, send it to us, and we'll try to make that happen. But this has been The Rebellion, your place for peace, liberty, free markets. Thanks for tuning in. And that's it, right, Banksy?
We love you. We need you. Don't forget the nuance.
Peace.
Don't hurt people and don't take their stuff.